A large industrial chemical plant in Vernon, just south of downtown LA, experiences a catastrophic tank explosion. The blast releases toxic fumes, causes structural fires, and it triggers a partial building collapse. The surrounding areas include warehouses, small businesses, residential pockets. These freeways, the I-5, I-10, 710, schools and community centers. This is a high-impact multi-agency crisis, perfect for this leadership analysis. For this analysis, I'm going to be focusing on a 4-story nonprofit food distribution center that's located about a third of a mile away from the explosion. There's about 120 employees and volunteers inside when this blast occurs. My emerging leader at the early time frames is a mid-level operations manager who suddenly finds themselves responsible for coordinating people in a chaotic environment. Across the wider region, roughly 500,000 people are affected by the explosion, the toxic plume, and the resulting infrastructure disruptions. In our building alone, about 120 people are impacted. The explosion itself is immediate, but the fires, the air quality issues, and evacuations last for days. Cleanup and recovery stretch into weeks and months, and services affected would include power, water, transportation, emergency medical response, and nonprofit operations. So 3 seconds after the chemical tank explodes, everything is instinctual. The building's shaken violently, alarms are blaring, people are panicking and freezing. In this moment, leadership emerges almost entirely from traits. Our operations manager stays calm while other people are panicking, demonstrating emotional stability and conscientiousness. 2 traits strongly linked to leadership emergence. Even in these first seconds, a primitive form of leadership style appears. The leader's tone becomes sharp and directive, not because they're thinking strategically, but because the situation is demanding immediate action. There's really no time for any kind of collaboration or discussion, just instinctive, trait-driven leadership that stabilizes the people around them. Judge and colleagues found that emotional stability and conscientiousness strongly predicted who would step up in sudden crises. That is exactly what we see at the 3-second mark. Our operations manager stays calm while others are freezing, which allows leadership to emerge instantly. By the 3-minute mark, the initial shock has passed, but chaos is taking over. Smoke is entering vents, people are coughing, and injuries are becoming visible. Here, leadership becomes more intentional. The leadership shifts fully into a directive style, giving clear commands to move people away from danger. But as soon as the group begins to stabilize, the leader transitions into a supportive style, helping calm those who are crying or disoriented. Ethical leadership also becomes critical at this stage. Supplies like water, masks, and first aid materials are limited, and the leader must distribute them fairly. Ethical decision-making, being transparent, consistent, and compassionate, helps maintain trust in a moment when fear could have easily taken over. House's research shows that effective leaders shift styles based on followers' needs. So at the 3-minute mark, our leader moves from a directive style during evacuation to a supportive style once people are safe, which would align perfectly with the path goal theory. And Brown and Trevino also highlighted that ethical leaders act fairly and transparently, especially when resources are scarce. At the 3-minute mark, our leader must allocate limited first aid supplies and masks without favoritism, which builds trust during panic. So 3 hours after the explosion, this situation is shifted from an immediate survival to more of a coordinated response. We've got first responders on scene, a triage area is set up, and the nonprofit staff and volunteers are scattered across the evacuation zone. Leader-member exchange theory helps explain how the leaders rely on trusted in-group members to handle critical tasks like head counts, communication with firefighters, first responders, and assisting the injured. But because the crisis is too large for one person, distributed leadership naturally emerges. Volunteers, staff, and even community members take on leadership roles. Things like directing traffic, organizing supplies, or helping out the injured. And at the same time, partial cell service can return. Therefore, e-leadership would become essential. The leader must communicate clearly through digital channels to avoid miscommunication and maintain trust while coordinating with multiple agencies. This blend of relational leadership, shared leadership, and digital communication is what keeps the response organized during these chaotic times. Grain and ULBN emphasized that high-quality leader-member relationships improved coordination under stress. And at the 3-hour mark, our leader relies on those trusted in-group staff to manage headcounts and triage, which speeds up response and reduces confusion. Pierce and Conger argued that shared leadership increases adaptability in complex crisis. And at the 3-hour mark, leadership would naturally become distributed. Volunteers, staff, and community members can all take on roles because not one single person could manage everything. And Avolio and colleagues also talked about that effective e-leadership blends digital and face-to-face communication. And at that 3-hour mark, when partial cell service is returning, our leader must send clear digital updates while preventing misinformation, a key e-leadership competency. So by the 3rd week mark, the crisis has transformed into a long-term recovery effort. The fires are out, but the community is dealing with contamination concerns, displacement, and economic disruption. At this stage, the leadership becomes both transformational and complex. The nonprofit CEO steps forward to provide a sense of hope and direction, articulating a recovery vision, trying to motivate exhausted staff, and helping the community imagine a path forward. But the environment is highly complex. There's multiple agencies, shifting regulations, environmental testing, and public pressure. Complexity leadership explains how the leader must blend administrative structure with adaptive problem solving and enabling collaboration across organizations. Competency-based leadership also becomes visible here. The leader draws on a wide range of competencies, from strategic planning to communication to political savvy. At this stage, leadership is less about the immediate action and more about guiding a system through uncertainty, rebuilding trust, and shaping the long-term recovery. Bass and Riggio shows that transformational leaders help organizations recover from trauma by providing vision and hope. And at the 3rd week mark, the nonprofit CEO motivates exhausted staff, frames a long-term recovery plan, which is classical transformational leadership. OLBN and colleagues also explains that complex environments require adaptive and enabling leadership. And at the 3rd week mark, the nonprofit CEO must coordinate with multiple agencies, navigate shifting regulations, and support innovation. Those are all the core elements of complexity leadership. This crisis scenario shows how leadership changes dramatically as the time passes. In the first seconds, leadership emerges from traits. Minutes later, it becomes about style and ethics. And hours later, it's shifting into relationships, shared leadership, and digital communication. And weeks later, leadership becomes transformational, strategic, and deeply complex. Each concept from the book helps explain a different layer of what leaders actually do in real emergencies. Together, they give us a complete picture of how effective leadership guides people from the moment of impact all the way through the long-term recovery. Thank you for watching.